You stupid bitch. Yeah, you're a stupid bitch. You stupid bitch.
Welcome to this week's episode of Stupid Bitches Say What, the Aussie podcast about everything and nothing, but always with wine, and your hosts, Sean Hipkins and Skye Lee Collett.
Buckle up, bitches, because this week we are going back in time as we discuss some notorious and interesting asylums of the past. Listen in while Skye shares her research from creepy old school Massachusetts, a consistent recurring state on SBSW, as are our drunken states, please.
Nice touch.
Thank you. And some harrowing tales of radioactive testing on very young children, at the Walter E. Fernald Developmental Center, while I cover the Whau Lunatic Asylum, aka the Auckland Lunatic Asylum, built in 1865. It was one of the largest asylums in the colony at the time. I'll chat about some of the history, its reputation, and also some of the grisly details of what you drinking, Skye?
I'm so glad that you asked. I'm on the beers first up this evening. A little bit of an extra dry twoies. I've drunk this a bunch of times on the podcast, so it's nothing new. There's no point
never featured here.
There's no point even pretending to have a sip and saying
it's
how
delicious.
it is on the palate, because I think all our loyal listeners know that I find it delicious. So that's what I'm drinking.
Oh, very good.
Pray tell, what are you drinking, Sean Bino Hipkins?
Well, I'm having a red, but this
Surprise.
is a bit of a special red. It's a Vino Tinto red wine, Barra de Varazia do Douro. It's Portuguese.
Portuguese, plus?
Portuguese, please. And it's 2020. 2020. The other one I had was 2016, but I thought, no.
Oh, you're even opening it.
I know, it's a cork.
Oh my God, you never get corks hardly anymore.
So you keep our listeners entertained with a little side song and dance while I twist.
You mean while I vape and watch you.
Yeah.
Impatiently, so that we can start our topics. Hurry up,
so I can start a drink at least. Now I really want to get the pop.
Can he do it, peeps? Can he do it on air?
I'm not deep enough.
Ew.
I can't get the latch to catch on.
Whiting. All
right, I'm just going to have to use brute strength.
Oh.
Did you hear it?
A little tiny pop, yes. It was rather subdued.
Oh, well, it popped pleasantly in my ear.
It did pop, but just very, very, softly popped.
Now I'm going to take a sip of this.
Please do.
And gently remove the alcohol from it. From this glass.
By inhaling it. Have a little swish.
Well,
give it a little sniff.
Oozes sophistication.
And how is it?
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, okay. I'm jealous.
So
I wish I had a red.
A Douro. I'd never had it before. And it's nice.
Douro.
Yeah. Douro. And it's 13.5%.
From Naked?
No. I don't know what that was. But no, I think it's a good pair of days.
Well, you know how I was talking about in one of the last podcasts, I think last one or the one before, about how I hadn't ordered the Naked and I was quite miffed because they kept giving me the 2 bottles, but I couldn't swap them and it was a dirty shardy.
Yeah.
Well, this week they gave me 3 bottles.
Oh, they must have heard. You do listen to us Naked Wines. Thank you for listening.
So I ordered that case quick smart.
And get a third.
One of them was a sparkling shardy, but I thought, we'll do any type of sparkling, really, won't we? As long as it's not a sweetie. So I thought,
and as long as it's not the first, have it after a bottle of other bobs, and you're fine.
Yeah, I can handle a sparkling shardy, I think.
I've got to wait I've got to wait about 10 days before my next amount goes into Naked Wine, and then I'll have my $180 to purchase another case.
Oh, see, I spent about 200 and something. I got 18 bottles, I think.
I do always sort of end up chucking in an extra 20
Yeah,
or
me
so.
too. Me too. It just depends on that. It just depends on, because like I get so sick because I think how much money I spend at the bottle shop on the wines that I pay for. And I just think, oh my God, I spend so much money. And it ends up working out to be, when you get a case from Naked, like $13 a bottle or something like that when you average it all out. So it's
and
just
decent
like
shit too.
generally decent shit. Yeah.
Generally, yes. There have been some disappointments, let's say. Yeah. Some hisses. So how's your week been, you stupid bitch?
My week's been really good. Had my little holiday, as you well know, so I'm now back at work. Did the old control delete of a whole lot of, my 600 emails that I returned to, because my thought process was, look, if you expect me to chase some of this stuff up, you can call me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Vinny had, when we went on leave, I think over the 6 weeks, he put in as his out of office message, basically, I'm deleting every single email when I come in. So if, because I can't, in a much more professional way,
of course,
because I can't be dealing with it in that time. And obviously it needs to be urgent. So speak to someone else about it.
I had someone relieving in my position. So again, I feel like I could, but I work in, client services. So it's very customer facing and very much, what can I do for you? How can I help?
Yeah. Not hold, I'm on leave.
But yeah, so I thought if people are like, why did you respond to my email? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Did my person relieving not respond to that? Oh, I'm so sorry for the confusion.
Oh, it
What's
must have got
problem?
lost. Yeah. Let me help you.
Tell me what you need.
Let me have words with my assistant.
Yeah. So that was quite refreshing to do that. And then everyone's like, oh my God, do you feel like you haven't left? Like, you're back to having so much work on your plate. I'm like, actually, no, I'm writing my podcast notes right now.
So please.
Because I stayed back till 6 at work and everyone's like, oh, you must be busy because you're staying back. And everyone's going to the pub for drinks. And they were like, come to the pub.
You're like,
and I'm like, no, I'm too busy.
I love that. I love that. Was it a hero's return? A hero's welcome on your return?
Yeah, look, it was. I certainly had some relieved conversations with people about thank fuck you back. Here you go, I'm handing this piece of work back over to you to finish off.
Thank you.
So yeah, but it was actually good too. I love the social aspect of being in the office and chatting to all my peeps. And
it is nice, isn't it?
It was good, but it was certainly straight back into it. End of financial year today.
Of course,
which is huge in my world. So yeah, there was a lot of stressed out people running around, freaking out a little bit. So, and I was like, I'm fine.
Yeah, you're not adding to it. You're not solving your problem by carrying on like that.
Because there's always that little, segue piece as well where people aren't really sure if you're back yet, like externally, like they've forgotten your return date and stuff like that. So I could just sort of like lay back and be like, am I back? I'm not telling you.
Yeah. Ask the right questions. You'll get the right
answers. If you call me, I'll answer. But otherwise,
so that's about it.
Just bogged down by the emails, please. And I guess the only other thing I'm going to touch on is that if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see that I have my dressing gown on. I also have my slippers on. I literally raced in the door from work, jumped in the shower so I could get into my clean jammies, because it's absolutely fucking freezing here.
It's gone chilly again, hasn't it? Last week we were wearing our hotel t-shirts. This week I'm wearing my StupidBSayWhat sweatshirt.
I couldn't find my sweatshirt because I wore it during the week, so I think it's still in the wash. I just had to go with my dressing gown. But under this is like a long sleeve, thick wool jumper, and I got tracky pants and slippies on.
Nice.
So how's your week been, stupid bitch?
Well, staying on the sweatshirt bandwagon, merch, by the time this episode airs, merch should definitely be live now. So I'm going to be bold and say, head to our Insta and Facebook pages for info on how you can get your official SBSW t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweatshirts, and the mugs. We love the mugs.
Proudly produced by the SBSW project.
Yes. And I need to figure out if we need to patent our designs or anything, or copyright them, or so other cunts don't just do them. There was a guy.
It's very straightforward to do it. I think you just pretty much lodge it, and unless no one's trying to fight you on it, you just lodge it. I think you might pay like a very small fee.
I'll look into it, because there was a guy in New Zealand. He was on a YouTube, one of those viral clips, and he did the whole, I came out the pub and neck minute, rah, 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 rah. And then Next Minute really took off, and he started selling shirts, but someone else had already patented it the Next Minute before he could and was making all the money. He was devastated.
Cheeky buggers.
I know. And we just know that the SBSW mugs, at least, and everything is just going to take off.
Get
and we
in
also
quick,
have our
people.
little, yes, we also have a little Christmas deco,
I know,
which
it's
is
very
nice.
cute. I love it.
So
It's
get
lovely.
online and get it before it runs out. Lulz. And we recognize shipping is high, but that's just for the first product only. So after that, it's only like an extra $1 for additional items. So buy in bulk or get an order in with your friends so you can share those costs.
That's it.
But now, so how my week has been, just about today in general, let alone the week, please.
I know you've been busy at work this week, haven't you?
Oh, it's been a super busy week. You've probably noticed there's been a lack of memes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is that because of end of financial year? You hit by that whole thing, or is it something else?
No, there is that too. So getting purchases in and all this stuff. So that's
final
been a big part of my
reports for
jobs.
the year and tying all
Exactly.
the loose ends up. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's been a very big day, to say the least. So I'll start with Taylor tickets. The moment that stopped the nation twice. First on the
Holy
28th
moly.
of June. Yeah, first on the 28th of June with the pre-sale, and then again with general tickets going on sale on the 30th of June, also known as today. Vinny and I were both online early on the morning of the 28th, logged into Ticketek, waiting for the time the tickets went on sale. Sydney went on sale at 10 a.m., Melbourne on sale at 2 p.m., and they're the only two places she's doing over here. We did not get in. We sat there for fucking hours, both on both sessions, watching it click over, refreshing. We were devastated.
I watched a few people at work doing it as well, like just having it in the background while they were doing other stuff, just letting it run through, trying to get them. And I was like, oh shit, is that happening today? And it pretty much took up most of the conversation that occurred on the floor at work on Wednesday. Was like, did they get them? Did they not? And
did anyone?
I don't know that anyone got them. No.
No one in our workplace got them. I don't think anyone in Vinny's got them. We knew a friend of ours who logged on a minute before they went on sale and had some within 15 minutes.
Oh, because they queued them straight in, even though it's not supposed to work like that.
Yeah, well, I think it's all random, basically.
Yeah.
Which is...
But pre-sale's normally a smaller select amount of tickets, isn't it? So then the general sale, like they pre-sale to try to get you into it and get you to subscribe to shit and whatever. But
exactly.
Then it's the main sale. So how'd you go with the main sale?
So then today, where am I? It was bloody stressful too. That's right. So yeah, we were exhausted by the end of the whole fucking thing, like literally. Exhausted because you're like looking at there, your heart rate's up here, you're like, is it going through? Then the countdown would stop on 0 and lag on 0 for about 10 seconds. You're like, oh my God, I'm in, and just start up again at 10. It sucked.
That's fucked.
Yeah. So we spent literally hours, blah, blah, blah.
That's how it used to be with big day out tickets. Do you remember?
Yeah. Splendor.
Trying to get them.
Splendor. I remember that being like that too. So yeah, by the second hour, we kind of knew it wasn't going to happen. So we picked ourselves up, we dusted ourselves off, so we consoled ourselves with some KFC that night and got ready to do it all again today. And I was only logged on today, though. Vinny wasn't logged on. He was in the office. I was working from home, so that made it a bit easier. And after 1.5 hours, I got through. So it was just ticking, and then it came up with the page. I was like, oh my God. And the pressure really hit then because, you got the timer counting down. You need all your details and all that shit, and you got to find actual tickets. Mm-hmm. So there was 4 shows now for Sydney. And I was clicking on the Friday show, and it would say next to the categories that we wanted, limited tickets available. And then the ones we didn't want, which were some of the lower ones, said single seats only. So I'm like, sweet,
oh my God.
Go in, get 2 tickets. Sorry, there's not enough. Go to the next, we're going up and down the fucking thingies. There was not enough, even though it didn't say single tickets only. Went to every single show, tried to do that in all of them. Sorry, only single tickets available. So I had to try and find tickets using the VIP. So I went for the cheapest VIP, which is cheaper than the A reserve tickets. And I was able to get 2 tickets.
Oh my God. How much?
$3.50 each.
Fuck off. Plus you got to go to Sydney for it.
Yeah. It's just one of those ones where we're just like, it's going to be the show of a lifetime. One of the things to say you're at.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like what was that big one in fucking Wembley where Queen performed and all that?
Oh, yeah.
Like one of those, like a Woodstock. So we're going to Sydney to see Taylor on the 24th of February next year. Also, other big events for today. I had to do a 10-minute presentation as part of my assessment for my diploma online with one of the facilitators of the course. That was nerve-wracking, but it went well, thank God. And I also considered my assessment for that module. So now I just have to wait and see how the fucking thing turns out. Hopefully get a competent.
I'm sure you will.
So it was a big day, a lot of emotions.
Sure, distinction.
Distinction, very high distinction. Now, before we get into this, I did just have a little blurb. So before Skye starts off, we here at Stupid Bitches Say What did want to say. It is important to note that while these stories we're about to get into paint a grim picture of an asylum's history, mental health care practices and societal attitudes have evolved significantly since those days. Today, we strive for more compassionate and evidence-based approaches to support individuals with mental health conditions. Take it away, Skye.
True that. Thanks for saying that. Because I'm going to go on to say that in the course of my research, there was many historical asylums that I read about, including many articles that were written recently based on an invigorated focus on all these locations within the journalistic world due to none other than someone's fave, American Horror Story Asylum.
Yes, I have a reference to that too.
So there was a big influx of people writing about historical asylums around the time that season had come out, because people were like, hey, let's go back in time and investigate like old school asylums, because obviously that season
hyped it up.
it was also focused loosely on an actual asylum. You knew that, didn't you? Yeah. So while it's fictional in the show, it was based on, and I forget, it starts with a W, I think, and you'll probably touch on this in yours anyway.
I do.
And whilst I'm going to focus on Walter F. Fernald Developmental Center for this segment, I'm also going to touch on some of the gruesome practices that were known to occur in many other centers, not just the one that I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
But I think this is going to be an icky one. So the Walter E. Fernald State School has gone by a number of names over the years. It was originally called the Experimental School for Teaching and Training Idiotic Children.
Oh, God.
Then Massachusetts.
It's brutal, isn't it?
Oh, it's so bad. Then Massachusetts School for Idiotic Children, and most recently, the Walter E. Fernald Developmental Center. It was located in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
The school was originally founded by Samuel Gridley Howe in 1848 and located in Boston, and then it was moved to Waltham in 1888, and eventually consisted of 72 buildings on 196 acres. So I researched so many different asylums. I'm not even kidding you. Like, I read through a whole bunch of different ones. And one of the articles I started on was just abandoned asylums and all the images that go with it. And man, there's some gruesome shit that you see. Like, there's nothing, I think, more freaky than seeing an abandoned asylum with like hospital beds with graffiti in the background and
everything derelict and shit.
And trees growing in it and stuff like that. It was very like shivery. But at its peak, it housed 2,500 young people. Originally a school for boys with low intelligence, later reports suggested that more than half of the students tested had an IQ deemed to be normal. The school was renamed. So
they were just probably troublesome or
orphans.
Didn't take kindly to fucking
kids that didn't have parents that just had
leadership.
To put them somewhere. Yeah. The school was renamed in honor of its third superintendent, Walter E. Fernald, in 1927. The name remained until its closure. It was regarded by many as the finest educational facility in the field of mental health during the period in which Walter E. Fernald was superintendent at the school. But interestingly enough, he was a firm believer in eugenics, the practice of selective breeding within the human population to improve the genetic quality of the human population.
Hail Hitler.
Sounds super honorable, don't you think?
Yeah. He's just wanted the best for people.
The school has been the subject of allegations of sexual and physical abuse of the students, accounts of which have been reported in the media. The standard of education was said to be extremely low, and the boys were housed in large, crowded dorms. The students were even the subject of medical experiments in the 1950s when the Quaker Oats Company, do you know who Quaker Oats is?
Yeah, Porridge.
Yeah, it's huge. Like, it's a huge American cereal or oats. So the Quaker Oats Company, along with Harvard and MIT researchers, fed boys cereal laced with radiation traces.
Yes.
The
Was
Quaker...
this was that an episode of Cold Case?
It was an episode of Cold Case where they all ended up being sterile. It was the one where the little boy goes missing, and it turns out that the nun had an affair and given birth to him, and then they pretended that he was the sibling of one of the girls that was already there, and they were supposed to meet with the horses. It was really messed up, that one. I bawled my eyes out at the end.
That was one of the episodes that was based on a real life thing, The Boy in the Box. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
So the Quaker Oats Company eventually paid out over $1.85 million in damages to the victims. And look, I tried to do a little bit more research on this, but at the time they were saying that, and this is based on, what I saw in Cold Case and not what I could actually find online, during the Cold War, and I guess before leading up to the Cold War, radiation testing was done quite openly, and people weren't really ashamed to say that they were doing it on people, who couldn't really object, because someone had to be the guinea pigs, is basically the thought process, which I think is insanely barbaric. But I guess that says a lot to the time, and it's a real testament to sometimes how people treated other people.
And they referred to the boys as idiotic, didn't they? It wasn't idiotic center or whatever
in the 1800s. Yes, that's when the late 1800s when it was created. By 1925 they'd changed it to the other aim, but I think also that was a loose term that they used to use that wasn't necessarily meant to be derogatory. I don't believe it was more just a word that was used to categorize certain types of mental ability, and obviously
like the word cretin and shit like that.
I think it's definitely something that we would go, oh, please don't.
We'd be a bit more sensitive about.
People idiots, definitely be more sensitive about it. So the Fernald School was the site of the 1946 to 53 joint experiments, as I mentioned, by Harvard and MIT, that exposed young male children to tracer doses of radioactive isotopes. So documents obtained in 1994 by the United States Department of Energy revealed the following details. The experiment was conducted in part by a research fellow sponsored by the Quaker Oats Company. MIT professor of nutrition Robert S. Harris led the experiment, which studied the absorption of calcium and iron. The boys were encouraged to join a science club.
Oh, of course.
Which offered larger portions of food, parties, and trips to the Boston Red Sox baseball games.
But you weren't going to be looking up at the stars.
Very similar to what they did in Cold Case. Remember, they had the science club, and that's how they were all selected. It was just the boys. The 57 members ate iron-rich cereals and calcium-enriched milk for breakfast in order to track absorption. Several radioactive calcium traces were given orally or intravenously. Radiation levels in stools and blood samples would serve as dependent variables. In another study, 17 subjects received iron supplement shots containing radioisotopes of iron. So iron must be the vessel that they try to get it in safely. I think they use iron with the radiation because you can't just inject radiation directly into people, because I think it would, kill you.
You turn into a superhero.
I don't know that that's how it works, but sure. Neither the children nor their parents ever gave adequate informed consent for participation in the scientific study. So the Advisory Committee of Human Radiation Experiments, reporting to the United States Department of Energy in 1994, reported on these experiments. So these people were quite aged at this time. Like, if this was happening in the 50s, early 50s, 1950 to 1953, by the time it was seen as an issue and they were looking at compensation, they would have been, almost in their 50s, if not older, depending on the age that they were the test subjects. So report on these experiments. So this is just basically on the report. In 1946, one study exposed 17 subjects to radioactive iron. The second study, which involved a series of 17 related sub-experiments, exposed 57 subjects to radioactive calcium between 1950 and 1953.
Jesus.
It is clear that the doses involved were low, and that is extremely unlikely that any of the children who were used as subjects were harmed as a consequence. Bullshit.
Oh, bullshit. Yeah, totally.
These studies remain morally troubling, however, for several reasons. First, although parents or guardians were asked for their permission to have their children involved in the research, the available evidence suggests that the information provided was at best incomplete. Second, there is the question of the fairness of selecting institutionalized children at all, children whose life circumstances were by any standard already heavily burdened.
Of course, yeah. Let's just fuck them up even more.
Exactly. And, not even knowing what the issues, what the impacts of the studies could actually do on their health, their well-being. It has been claimed that the highest dose of radiation that any subject was exposed to was 330 millirem, the equivalent of less than 1 year's backyard radiation in Denver. A 1995 class action
suit. Why didn't they test those fucking Denver people?
Yeah, they already were exposed to radiation.
Exactly.
A 1995 class action suit resulted in a 1998 district court decision awarding the victims a $1.85 million settlement from MIT and Quaker. So they did pay for it in the end, many years later. And there's nothing in the research to say how many of those people were still alive, considering that they were well past middle age at that point.
Yeah.
The school also participated in studies of thyroid function in patients with Down syndrome and their parents. The study showed that their iodine metabolism was similar to normal controls. So another class action was filed in the 1970s in relation to the conditions at the Walter E. Fernald State School. And in 1993, a judge ruled that those who were treated there were entitled to a guaranteed level of care, regardless of cost, to compensate for decades of neglect and abuse. Other alleged human rights violations that occurred at the asylum included women being sterilized, not uncommon in earlier times, I'm afraid. So the asylum was subject to two major lawsuits, the one about the radiation and also about the conditions that the people lived in during their time at the asylum. In 2001, 320 adult patients were living in Fernald, and in December 2004, Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney announced the facility would be closed.
Oh, Mitt Romney.
Yeah, I know. I didn't realize he was the Massachusetts governor. I always wondered about how he, was political.
How he ended up there, yeah.
Yeah, because he ended up being a candidate for the presidency, didn't he? For the Republicans.
I think he's a Republican, and I don't know if
he's a Mormon, isn't he? And he doesn't drink.
I'm not sure. I don't really know that much.
The lawsuit was still ongoing when the last resident was discharged in 2014. So the lawsuit for the abuse, not the Quaker lawsuit, was still going in 2014, even though it started, when did I say? Back in 1993. That's another thing I think they tend to do, is just drag it out as long as they possibly can. So that, people don't survive it. The Walter E. Fernald State School was closed and abandoned, and the city of Waltham in Massachusetts now owns the site. So based on my research, lots of young teenage hooligans like to go and spend a little bit of time there. There has been parts that they've, had to pull down for various safety reasons and things like that. But in May 2017 and 18, the Waltham's Lions Club held a fundraising carnival on the grounds with rides, games, prizes, a petting zoo and food.
And plenty of Lions Christmas cake for all.
So they went on to use it for many other fundraising things. But as of 2021, it remains derelict. Whilst there's lots of suggestions about trying to remodel it and do it up and do a bunch of stuff to it, it hasn't really happened. And then, just a fun fact before I finish off on my asylum talk.
I do love a good fun fact.
The Walter E. Fernald Developmental Center is neighbours and shares a cemetery with the Massachusetts Metropolitan Hospital. the Metro
Mm.
Hospital, if you will.
Huh?
Built in 1927, it was also notorious for its cruel patient abuse and the murder of Anna Marie DeVee in 1978. According to research, Melvin Wilson, who killed her, not only dismembered her, but kept 7 of her teeth in his hospital room.
Oh my God.
Reports at the time accused the hospital of covering it up and also other patient disappearances.
Oh, it could be a good true crime segue.
So they're right next door to each other. We've got a cemetery planted right in the middle, and they're right there.
They just throw the bodies over.
Yeah, Metropolitan Hospital is actually quite notorious for a number of other things. You know, we could have gone into all the patient abuse and things like that, but I just thought I'd touch on the murder in 1978.
Interesting. Jesus Christ, hey?
I know. And that was probably one of the more darker ones that I could find the most information on. But I tell you what, there's some dark history of asylums in the US, but also across the UK and Europe. There was a couple
anywhere
of different
with
ones.
a long enough history would have some pretty shit fucking stories about asylums, orphanages, all of that. Ireland has some terrible orphanage stories.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. So that's it for me.
That's it for you. God, those poor boys.
I know.
Not one of them turned into fucking the Flash or anything.
I know.
Stan Lee has a lot to answer for.
I reckon Tyler would give himself up for, radioactive testing, just in the hope that he could become a superhero. I think if anyone was saying, hey guys, volunteers, he'd be like, yep, me, I'll do it. Pick me.
By grab Thor's hammer.
He often says he'd like to be bitten by a radioactive spider.
Yes, Tyler Spider-Man. Imagine him run around.
Yeah. Over to you now, stupid bitch.
All right, thanks, stupid bitch. So I'm going to do, and I think, so it's spelled W-H-A-U. I think it may be pronounced Whau, because I know in Maori language, the W-H is pronounced F. Mm-hmm. And that's only because we went to what is spelt as the Wakapapa snowfields when we lived there, but it's actually pronounced the Whakapapa snowfields. Oh. And I will never forget that. There was a motherfucker and a father fucker. A whakapapa.
I love that.
So I'm going to cover the Whau Lunatic Asylum, aka the Auckland Lunatic Asylum, which was a psychiatric hospital on the Oakley Farm Estate in Point Chevalier, Auckland, New Zealand, built in 1865 on the Great North Road. It was the largest asylum in the colony at the time. Most of the site of the former asylum is currently occupied by the Unitec Institute of Technology, with smaller sections occupied by the Mason Clinic, which is a forensic psychiatric clinic also serving as a facility for mentally disturbed prisoners, and various other private businesses. So students now study where Auckland's mentally infirm were once imprisoned. Fun fact, I worked at Unitec when we lived in Auckland in 2010 to 11. The building I worked in was one of the wards. My desk was in a communal area, while on the other side of the building, all the directors' offices were former padded rooms of the asylum. Obviously, the padding was down. Yeah, creepy, hey?
Super creepy.
During my orientation, they took us around some of the older buildings and gave us history of them. And one of the buildings, and I think it was like the Dean's building or one of the main buildings, there was still some grates in the ground or at the bottom of the walls where the staff would look in and see the patients back in the day that had been housed in the cellar and chained to the walls and shit. So part of the story was also that the place closed down in 1992 due to lack of funding. And it was bought by the education sector. But the patients that were there at the time were all just let out into the community, released, if you will. Like they didn't get shipped out. They're just like, okay, shop shut. There you go.
Good luck in life.
Yeah.
Have a nice time out there. Better find something to eat quick, smart.
Yeah, exactly. You're cured. Go. Now, I can't recount any spooky stories myself besides this one. So there was one day we were all sat at our desks, and the room that I was in, the ceilings were like super high, old school high ceilings. And there was this scratching noise coming from above. And it was near the end of the day, so there was only a couple of staff left in the open office area. And it was a big room as well. So we were trying to listen for where the noise was coming from. And then next minute, one of the ceiling panels falls from the roof and it It's directly
Ooh.
above the pod where these two people were still working, and it came crashing down to the ground. They both look around to see what caused it and start screaming and running out of the pod, jumping on their desks and chairs and shit, when a possum then bolted out of the area trying to get to freedom.
That
But
explains it.
other than that, no other personal spooky experiences. But let's have a look at the history. In 1851, the original open quote special asylum close quote for Auckland received public support, and by 1853 Auckland's first asylum was built on the grounds of the Auckland Hospital. However, by 1862 this building was overcrowded, and consequently support was sought from the provincial government to create a bigger asylum to cater for the amount of patients. While building was complete in 1867, it stopped at the left wing of the main hospital because £20,000 had been spent, and that was thought adequate for the community at the time. So patients were moved from the Auckland Hospital site to the new asylum on the 8th of March, 1867, and it became known over the years as the Lunatic Asylum at the Whau, Avondale Lunatic Asylum, and Carrington Psychiatric Hospital. Over 100 years later, in 1971, the building was considered to be one of the best Victorian buildings in Auckland. In keeping with national change, the Auckland Hospital Board took control of the hospital from the health department the following year. Controversial plans were considered for one of the hospital's wards to be turned into a medical security prison in 1986. However, in 1992, Carrington Hospital was closed by the Auckland Area Health Board and purchased by Unitec. Well, by Carrington
how far was
Polytech.
it from your place?
So I would get the bus. There was 3 zone buses, so I'd get the longer bus. It was probably about maybe a 45-minute bus ride.
So quicker if you were driving.
Yeah, it would have been quicker if you were driving.
Yeah, right. Because they have a lot of really old buildings in Auckland, don't they?
They do. They're all very still colonial type. Yeah.
Because even that building that you lived in, like they'd remodeled it and stuff, but that was an original old building, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was
the base of it at least.
Old. Yeah.
Yeah.
Historic. Yeah.
Yeah, historic. Yeah.
The McWhirters building, which is now the new Farmers building, I think. So as you could imagine, there are a plethora, if you will, of ghost stories associated with the asylum. Tales of creaking doors and far-off voices, faces appearing in windows, and music haunting the corridors. However, the supernatural tales pale in comparison to the real-life horrors of the life at the asylum.
I bet.
In the 1800s, the building housed around 1,000 patients, which back then you'd think would have been at least 1% of the fucking population. Hundreds are said to have died at the hospital, both patients and staff, due to suicide, fire, and disease. In 1922, 60 perished as typhoid ripped through the inmate population, aided by the facility's poor sanitation and hygiene conditions. Some deaths, of course, are hard to confirm. Was there a warden who really was murdered by a deranged patient with a pitchfork? Was there a woman burned alive in 1877 by a fire lit from another patient that gutted the entire building? Does she continue to haunt the corridors of a building still? Ooh.
Sometimes that's the most frustrating thing about doing our Back in Times or our old episodes, is because it's hard to get factual information, isn't it? It's all based on rumors, unless it was a huge event that was, continually in the media. You're just drawing at people's recollection. So it's like, did it happen? Did it not happen?
And you can't really, and I mean, I know you probably can't really today as well, but you can't really trust the authorities of the time back then to have really recounted what actually happened.
Or the media and how it was represented.
Exactly. So it's hard to separate the fact from fiction, but that kind of is the fun part, right? Some of this. You like to think of the conspiracies. However, the death of 35-year-old patient Thomas Meredith in 1897 was well covered in the press. After slipping away from his work in the gardens, staff and police undertook a search for Avondale to Henderson, which are places in Auckland, to find the escapee. It took them more than 2 weeks to locate Meredith, and when they did eventually find him, he was hanging by his belt from the branch of a willow tree just meters beyond the asylum walls. He'd been hanging in the tree for literally weeks, and they couldn't find him. They did this huge search.
Oh, they didn't look close enough. They went out thinking he just ran away, but he just wanted some freedom.
Jump the fence.
Just, get on with
not
it.
be in there. Yeah. The asylum literally has a history filled with haunting tales and disturbing practices. Like many psychiatric institutions of the past, this asylum was notorious for its harsh and questionable treatments. Methods such as electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, insulin-induced comas, and even lobotomies were employed in attempts to cure or control patients. These procedures often cause significant harm and suffering. As the number of patients increased over the years, the Auckland Lunatic Asylum became severely overcrowded. The staff struggled to provide adequate care for everyone, leading to neglect and mistreatment of patients. Conditions were unsanitary, and basic necessities such as food, clothing, and proper medical attention were often lacking, as is the case with all those ones that you were researching and seeing the pictures of. You know, that would have been that same shit. Patients admitted to the asylum were often forgotten by society and their families. Many spent years of it, or even their entire lives, within the institution, cut off from the outside world. The loss of personal identity and the dehumanizing effects of long-term institutionalization added to the tragic history of the asylum. The asylum housed individuals with a wide range of mental health conditions. Some patients had been institutionalized due to societal prejudices or misunderstandings rather than having a genuine mental illness. This led to stories of individuals who were wrongly confined and suffered greatly due to the stigma surrounding mental health at the time. Shit like that always makes me think of Girl Interrupted. You've seen that movie, haven't you? You haven't.
It's on my
That's
list.
right.
I need to put it back on my list.
Yeah. So I know it was a book first, but the movie I could watch any day, anytime. And I'm sure I've wanged on about it during our podcast, please. But I remember there being patients in the asylum who were sent there for being committed for being like a compulsive liar or having an eating disorder or Tourette's, being a klepto, and of course being gay. And I do realize that some of those can be attributed to a mental health, except for the gayness. They didn't need to be shut up in wards away from society. It's pretty fucking brutal what they go through and what they went through.
Yeah.
What a fucking lot in life.
It just made me realize, because I forgot to put this in my notes, but when the asylum that I researched, there was a couple of community notice boards during some of the notes. And there was people who were trying to get records about, like, they were researching their family tree and knew that they had been in the asylum at some point. And then one woman was talking about how she managed to find some records of her uncles. I think it was 2 uncles and an aunt that were institutionalized when they were children and ended up dying there. And on the ledger that she was able to locate of the information, they started off as a patient, and then later throughout the years, with the status of their residence was changed from patient to inmate. It was almost like, so they'd been children, grown up there, had been there as a patient, but then obviously had done something in the situation based on all the horrible things that happened there, and
probably had sex with somebody or something like that,
and then were then there as an inmate.
And like when you think
that would have been so subjective.
Yeah, totally. And like when you think, and I'm about to touch on the American Horror Story thing, but like in asylum they were ran by nuns and priests and shit like that, so a lot of them were run by those things. So anything that you did that was outside of the Bible's teachings, offense. Yeah, you were fucked.
Not an offense by the law, but a religious
offense. Yeah. So Briarcliff Manor from American Horror Story Asylum is actually based on Willbrook State School.
Told you it started with a W. I just couldn't remember it.
An institution for intellectually impaired children in New York that operated from 1945 to 87. Can you believe that? The scandal when that broke out, overcrowded by 50%. So I think it had like a 4,000 hold and they had 6,000 people in there. Kids neglected terribly, malnourished and covered in their own body matter. Staff abused them physically and sexually. So asylums of the past really had the reputation to be a horrible, sadistic place, didn't they? I'm sure there were some good ones and that a lot of the staff were there to help, but yeah.
And considering the amount of people that went through them, like even one institution is too many. Do you know what I mean? Like considering there was multiple around the world that had the similar themes in pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
Like, I guess that was the time. That's how people treated people in that sort of situation.
And I think too and I could be very wrong, but I think too with a lot of them, once you were admitted, you were fucked.
Yeah, especially if you didn't have any family, trying to get you out or do anything for you.
Because they weren't gonna
like a lot of put you in there.
Exactly, you're even worse then. So I have a fun little fact again. I found whilst researching this topic, and I'm only bringing it up for the relevance it has. So it's the site of New Zealand's first execution. Where do you think that was? It's got to be
Auckland.
relevant.
Auckland.
Yes, but it was at the corner of Queen and Victoria Streets, which was
Oh,
also the intersection that Vinny and I lived on.
yeah.
So
Okay.
remember seeing the World Cup cheerleaders
Yes,
there?
I vividly remember that intersection. I
Yeah.
remember the lights. I remember people coming, the whole traffic jam that happened for the World Cup, us at the window.
Yeah. So you know where our building was, and we'd look out to the intersection. So if you look diagonally across from us, it was the ANZ building.
Yep.
And that's where the
We had dinner there, didn't we?
held.
Wasn't there restaurants there or something?
Oh, I don't know
There's
if it
one
was.
across the road that I thought we went to, and we had dinner upstairs somewhere.
We went to a Dendy's. Wasn't that one, was it?
We went to a bunch.
We did go to a bunch. On the central city corner 180 years ago, a young boy was preparing for his death. It was the 7th of March, 1842, and 17-year-old, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, Maketu Whārautara was about to become the first person ever to be legally executed in New Zealand.
And he was 17. And he was the first person ever at 17.
Yeah. The gallows sat next to Auckland's courthouse and jail on the corner of Queen and Victoria Streets.
It's crazy to think someone died there and you guys just walked around it so many times.
No. Well, and there would have been heaps of others that died there, got hung there. Not just died, yeah. Whārautara, the son of Nukapui chief, was sentenced to hang for a multiple homicide. So maybe he did deserve it, unless it got pinned on him. He'd been tried and found guilty of using an axe to split the heads of Thomas Bull, his wife Elizabeth Robertson, their 2 children, and their ward Isabella Brind as they slept in Moturuhia in the Bay of Islands.
At 17, and he had kids and a wife.
Oh no, he killed.
Oh, a guy,
Thomas
his
Bull.
wife, and their kids.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
And their ward. The adults were said to have abused him and offended his mana, but it was never understood why he killed the children. On the day of the hanging, he requested to be baptized. The ritual was conducted by Reverend John Churton, and Whārautara emerged Wiramu Kingi. It was New Zealand's first state-sanctioned killing and far from its last. Between him and Walter Bolton, who died by hanging at Mount Eden prison in 1957, New Zealand executed 82 other people, 81 men and 1 woman.
Shit.
So yeah, that's my
nothing really.
My asylum.
Other countries though who've executed people.
Yeah.
Australia's would be way worse than that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed our trip down memory lane, please. A spooky, twisty, and scary trip, if you will.
Tune in next week for What's the Haps, where we discuss the topics that piqued our interest, please, for the month of July 2023.
Piqued our interests what? Piqued our interests what?
Please. Don't
Emphasize
forget
on that. Please.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, please. And remember, if you're whining, you're winning. Good night, stupid bitches.
Good night.
Yeah, that stupid bitch. He's a stupid bitch. What a stupid bitch. That stupid bitch.